I get it. Scrolling through endless listings, you see a sleek 32-inch monitor with 6K and HDR plastered across the banner, only to end up with a screen that looks washed out on your desk or forces you to upgrade your GPU just to get a decent picture. That gap between the glossy photos and the real-world experience is why I'm doing this deep dive. I've spent a few weeks testing the Kuycon G32P in my home office, swapping it with my old 1440p panel, and reading every technical thread I could find. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the most obvious draw is the 6K resolution on a 32-inch IPS panel. At 61443456 you're looking at 223 ppi, which means text is razor sharp and UI elements stay crisp even when you scale up to 200%. For anyone who spends hours editing Photoshop files or navigating massive Excel spreadsheets, that extra pixel density translates into less eye strain because you're not constantly squinting at fuzzy edges. In practice, I noticed my eyes tiring less after a 3-hour video editing session, simply because the detail was there from the start. Color fidelity is the next big selling point. The monitor claims 99% sRGB and 99% DCI-P3 coverage, and the factory calibration feels legit. When I loaded a Rec. .709 test clip in DaVinci Resolve, the gradients were smooth and there was no banding, even in the deep shadows. The 3500 nit peak brightness pushes HDR highlights far beyond what a typical office monitor can do, making HDR movies feel more cinematic on a 60Hz panel. That said, the HDR implementation isn't a full VESA display HDR 600 experience. The local dimming is absent, so blacks stay more dark gray than true black, but the overall punch is still noticeable for streaming Netflix or YouTube HDR content. Connectivity is where the G32P tries to be a one-stop shop. A single 100W USB-C port handles video, data, and power delivery, which is a dream if you have a laptop that can drive a 6K display. I connected my 2023 MacBook Pro and it powered the laptop while delivering a flawless 6K signal, no flicker, no latency. There are also HDMI 2.1 and DisplayPort 1.4 inputs, so you can hook up a desktop GPU without relying on USB-C alone. The only hiccup I ran into was that the HDMI port maxes out at 4K at 60 Hz, so if you want the full 6K bandwidth you have to use DisplayPort, which not every graphics card supports out of the box. Ergonomics get a proper mention because a 32-inch screen can dominate a small desk. The stand is surprisingly sturdy, offering height, tilt, swivel, and pivot adjustments. I could raise the top edge to eye level without wobbling, and the VESA-compatible mounting holes let you switch to an arm if your workspace demands it. The low blue light mode and built-in flicker-free tech claim I care, and after a day of dual monitor work I didn't notice the typical headaches that sometimes come with prolonged IPS usage. It's a subtle win, not a headline feature, but it matters when you're looking at pixel-dense content for 8 hours straight. Now, who should actually spend the money on this monitor? If you're a photographer, video editor, or graphic designer who needs that extra resolution and wide color gamut for color-critical work, the G32P gives you a lot of canvas without stepping up to a 40-inch professional panel. It also shines for anyone who wants a high-resolution desktop for multitasking. 1080p windows can sit side by side without feeling cramped. On the flip side, if you're primarily a gamer, the 60 Hz refresh rate and lack of adaptive sync make this a less attractive choice. Competitive titles will feel sluggish compared to a 144 Hz VA panel, and the HDR performance, while decent, won't match a monitor built specifically for gaming. There are a couple of hidden trade-offs worth flagging before you click Add to Cart. First, driving a native 6K signal at 60 Hz demands a fairly beefy GPU. I had to tap into an RTX 4090 to keep frame rates smooth in my editing software, and a mid-range card would struggle or force you down to 4K scaling, which defeats part of the purpose. Second, the panel's 2000:1 contrast ratio is respectable for an IPS display but still falls short of true black levels you get from VA or OLED screens, so dark scene movie watching isn't as immersive as you might expect. Finally, The price point lands you in the $800–900 range, which is a solid middle ground but not a bargain if you're on a tight budget. A 1440p 27-inch IPS could cover most tasks for half the cost. In real-world usage, the monitor feels like a workhorse that quietly outperforms many gaming panels when it comes to color work, but it won't replace a dedicated high-refresh monitor for esports. The strength is the combination of pixel density, color space,